français, French. This is the word that I'm going to spend a little bit of time on. It's a word that stands at the head of the register of words in the dictionary that talk about the specific philosophical traditions of each one of the languages, the main European languages, before the editors. This one was written by Alain Badiou. It has, therefore, the cachet of that particular name attached to it and can stand substantial scrutiny as a result. This register of names, entries, is the most irritating part of this damn dictionary. It sucks. Every one of these entries trembles on the edge of becoming an exercise in nationalist chauvinism. And this one is the worst of them all. So one has to, a lot of this book irritated me and continues to irritate me profoundly, but nothing so much as these entries. And you'll see why in just a second. You won't see why I'm irritated. That's for me and my therapist. But you'll see what might be irritating about entries such as this. The conceptual stakes are fairly high here. The project of the Vocabulaire Européen de Philosophie was fundamentally an anti-globish project. It was a project that sought to re-particularize terms, to re-embed them within national traditions, and to make the point that the translation of them into a single general equivalent English for the purposes of the production of commodities and for the purpose of the commodification of philosophy substantially flattened these complex, dense histories of usage and really reduced the value of the concepts. So the paradox for us as translators of the French back into Globish or into English was substantial. We were, as it were, undoing the project of the Vocabulaire Européen de Philosophie in order to promote it much more widely. This was our little impossible task. Within the vocabulaire, French, Italian, Spanish, English, Hebrew, Greek, Latin, all of these words function as the names of philosophical idioms. And so each one of them takes on the kind of chauvinistic challenge of bringing out what is particularly philosophical about, say, Italian or Greek or German. And at the head of these is the language of the dictionary. French, le français. Badiou wrote français as a defense of the specific nature of philosophy in French, but he succeeds by the end of the entry in making all philosophy into a form of debased French, unless it's in French. Right? This is his Platonism coming out to the fore. Tendentially, ideally, formally, philosophy is French. And all of the other languages are, playing catch-up with the clarity and distinctness of the ideas as formulated in French. So this residual irritation of mine with Badiou's entry on French was an irritation with the whole register of lexemes that concern the natural languages, because they're always the place where the arrogance of national identity shows forth in the book. Never more than in français. In français, the finger is pointed at the greatness, not just of français, but of the Vocabulaire Européen de Philosophie as the vehicle in which français overcomes the poor empiricism of globish English, the pudding, I love that, the plain and stodgy pudding of globish English. And so with this irritation on my shoulders, I went back to français in English, in anglais, and looked at one of my favorite infamous paragraphs there with an eye to speaking about it to you a little bit today. And I noticed two things about it when I read it. First of all was that it was something that was completely wrong about this, and I couldn't believe that Badiou would have made a mistake like this. So I looked at the French, and of course, he hadn't made that mistake. It was his damn translator who had made the mistake. So I want to tell you that this is the first erratum that I want you to correct in our translation, and it's on page 354 for those of you who have it with you. And then I noticed one other thing, which was that you can't really open this book and look at a term without being sent out to other terms, either in the book or outside of the book. And the term that I was sent to immediately, I remembered that it didn't exist in the vocabulary because I had agreed to write it, and I never did. It was the term sovereignty, souveraineté. This is the English paragraph the translator renders from Badiou's French, and then I'll read you the French. You'll see what's wrong with it. We know, of course, and this is a primary theme of this dictionary, that nothing peremptory can be said about languages that will not be disproven by some writer or poem or other. It is thus, rightly or wrongly, we sometimes envy the power of German to lay out in an idolatrous semantics the depth offered by infinite exegesis. We also sometimes wish for the descriptive and ironic resources of English. This marvelous texture of the surface, the argumentation always circumscribed, which does not totalize anything, since the grammar is never that of the here and now. And even the branching of Italian. It's like the marvelous contempt of France for Italy. Oh, the branching of Italian. When we stop thinking that it muddles everything at will and is running 30 different conversations at once, all erudite and mimetic, we admire its velocity, and that when it affirms something, it keeps a clear eye on the other possible affirmation that a simple repentance over the sentence may bring to mind. Oh, it's just like, oh. But, of course, but this is not the style of the French. No, we are sober, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so this makes some sense, but there's a sentence that makes no sense, which is the one about English. We also sometimes wish for the descriptive and ironic resources of English, this marvelous texture of the surface, the argumentation always circumscribed, which does not totalize anything, since the grammar is never that of the here and now. That makes no sense, right? If Badiou is holding and hewing to the French contempt for American and British empiricism, the here and now, then it can't be that the problem with the grammar of English is never that of the here and now. It must be something else. And indeed, it is. Badiou does not screw up at this level. He screws up at many other levels, but not at this level. He says, nous savons certes, et il en est souverainement question dans ce dictionnaire, que rien de péremptoire ne peut être dit sur les langues que quelques écrivains, quelques poèmes ne viennent démentir. Ce savoir ne nous empêche pas, nous philosophes, d'entretenir une image des langues certes approximative, mais efficace. C'est ainsi qu'à tort ou à raison, il nous arrive d'envier le pouvoir qu'a la langue allemande de distribuer dans une sémantique idolâtre des profondeurs offertes à une exégèse infinie. Il nous arrive aussi de désirer la ressource descriptive et ironique de l'anglais. Ce toucher merveilleux de la surface, cette argumentation toujours circonscrite qui ne totalise rien parce que la grammaire n'est jamais que celle de l'ici et du maintenant. This is a classic example of a screw-up, a contresens, because he didn't get that most French formulations, the ne que, right? N'est jamais que. So make sure to note that in your edition of the vocabulaire. In the next edition of the vocabulaire, we will certainly correct this or else. So from this observation about français, on the shoulders of my irritation at the general register of lexematic nationalism that it represents, came both the humbling and humiliating acknowledgement that we had screwed up, we editors, in not catching this particular error, and the more interesting, I hope, observation that when Badiou is writing this, he uses a word that his translator doesn't get right here, perhaps because it doesn't work the same way in English as it does in French. The word in English, or the example in English, this is a primary theme of this dictionary, the French, right? Il en est souverainement question dans ce dictionnaire. Sovereign, sovereignly, it is dominantly, it is preponderantly, it is the sovereign concept in this dictionary, that there is nothing that cannot be undemonstrated by a poet or a writer in a language. That's a very different thing from saying that this is a primary theme in the dictionary. The whole question of the relation of concepts to the field of terms, the question of the distribution of power, the way that concepts are invested in power, in sovereignty, is entirely absent from the translator's version of Français. It seems to me that the symptomatic desire to make French sovereign over the national languages in which other philosophers try to express themselves rudely and empirically is also absent here, when we simply make this a matter of primacy. So what I would encourage you to do as you read through your copy and copies, I suggest that you buy 5 or 6 of them for distribution to cousins and also for use as weapons. They're very, very useful. As you read through your copies, make corrections on page 354. Little aide-mémoire, this is where they screwed up, that sort of thing, please. But also take away from your reading of the vocabulaire of our version of it the sense that it is a kind of vector outwards. It should take you not within the bounds of the book, but outside of it, to words that float next to it, the word sovereignty, the word power, which are not in the book, but are called out ghostlily by the book, both in its errors and in its felicities.